Absolute Green Lantern is doing something really interesting, and I want to talk about it. To do so, we're going to be looking at the first 3 issues. That's what's out time of recording, but it's enough to get a good sampling of what we're about to talk about. And that's the way this book is blending both Silver and Golden Age Green Lantern lore origins, and just a whole bunch of other concepts. It's fun. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics. Let's talk about Green Lantern and Absolute Green Lantern. Absolute Green Lantern is part of the second wave of Absolute books to come out of the Absolute universe, coming out in the same group that features the Absolute Flash and Absolute Martian Manhunter. The first 3 issues we're going to be looking at are all written by Hal Ewing with art by Jahnoy Lindsay. We took a detailed look at issue 1, so I'll link that down below. Now, before we get into the lore, we must briefly describe what's going on inside the book. So we're going to give a little Cliff Notes plot synopsis. So if you don't want to know anything, spoilers. If not, you are forewarned. And forewarned is forearmed, just like Majin Abin-Sur. Absolute Abin-Sur does have some Dragon Ball Z vibes. So the story as it's unfolding in Absolute Green Lantern is being told in 2 parts, one in the present and one in the near past. The past part starts off with the arrival. It also sets up some of the characters and their relationships. This series is recontextualizing the original Abin-Sur encounter through a slightly more sinister, or at least more ambiguous lens. Definitely more so than the original Hal Jordan origin from the Silver Age that many are familiar with. That one has more of an adventurous sci-fi tone. In issue 1, what one sees is that a giant force field or screen descends around part of, or maybe all of, entirely Evergreen. It traps the residents inside, and this includes several Green Lantern characters all hanging out in this area. We have Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart, Joe Mullein, Guy Gardner, and more. We'll get to the bit more later. There are just a bunch of people in this town. They're ready. However, that's not where the story starts off. It starts off in the present, which is slowly moving forward issue by issue. But at the start of the first issue, it's Hal wandering. He's terrified and fused with or contains a power or weapon he can't entirely control. One that is activated by intense emotion and seems to seek out light, or it sucks things into it. While he has been told that he must be without fear, he can't get there, and he's very afraid, and it's not helping him wield this thing. We follow him and see his black hand consume several people, potentially killing them, but that's up in the air. We gotta leave that. Although it is likely that people died. People have died in this series so far, so. However, these events do leave some things behind, for a reason that we'll get to later. I know, the suspense, much coming to discuss later. At the end of issue 1, Jo showed up with her abs to talk with Hal, and she was infused with a Green Lantern light, and she had the classic Green Lantern symbol on her, which is meant to be presented as something more mysterious in the Absolute universe. Her light is getting to Hal because his hand seeks light and he can't really control it or stop himself from attacking her later on. Now, as the issues go on, we get to see more about what transpired inside the bubble in the lead up to how Hal and Jo have been transformed, potentially judged. Because that's what Abin-Sur is doing, taking people and declaring judgment, and for the moment, seemingly killing them, although it's likely that's not what's occurring. Not for the ones surrounded by the green light. He did actually kill some people though. So far, what we've seen in the issues is the arrival, some of the brutality that came with it in issue 1, the confrontation with Guy in issue 2, which also shows how Hal got the gun that is now seemingly fused to his hand, or at least he can make a construct like it or something. And then in 3, we got the revelation of Jon Stewart and his removal, which is largely what inspired this video, because issue 3 does something very nerdily fun, and that is it jumps through some hoops to play with and kind of reimagine a classic and oft mocked weakness from the Silver Age, a part of Green Lantern lore that is often maligned, and that is the yellow weakness / impurity. So with that plot and groundwork laid out, because this is much more of an atmospheric piece so far, not a lot of action has taken place in terms of moving things forward, which is not to say that things haven't happened, because they have, but it's definitely a builder. But with all that laid out, we can get to what's being played with. The Absolute universe, while a separate universe, does use a lot / most of the main universe as a foundation to be pushed against. Each book does this in a different way. Now, when well done, each work can stand on its own in terms of the universe feeling like its own thing, but there are these extra treats and kernels for people who are familiar with the original mythos and lore. Absolute Green Lantern is set up as a mystery with a cosmic horror edge. Just what happened in Evergreen? What are these powers? Why are they different between people? How are characters being judged? And for those who are familiar with Green Lantern lore, it's what's changed and why are certain people being affected a certain way? One of the most fascinating things about this universe is the blending of so many different historical Green Lantern elements, specifically surrounding Alan Scott's and Hal Jordan's origins. Alan Scott, who debuted in All-American Comics 60 in 1940, was saved from death by a Green Lantern, labeled by the story as magical, and it was also a bringer of prophecy. So it was that Alan's ring was linked more with the concept of being of the occult, a magic ring, and that difference would kind of be solidified for a bit over time. However, Alan's ring, or rather lantern, did actually come from space, so there was always that element attached to it. The green flame, as it labels itself, initially comes to Earth via meteor. Its liquid metal is then melted down and made into a green lamp. This in ancient China by Chang, an occultist. It's only later that it's transformed into a lantern. However, when it first comes, it also speaks a prophecy in a voice that is ageless and toneless. So let's go. 3 times shall I flame. Green first to bring death. Second to bring life. Third to bring power. This third flaming is for Alan, who is then tasked to fight evil. You who are to have this power, you must use it to end evil. The light of the Green Lantern must be shed over the dark evil things, for the dark evil things cannot stand light. Power shall be yours if you have faith in yourself. Lose that faith and you lose the energetic power of the Green Lantern. For willpower is the flame of the Green Lantern. So you see a bunch of things that are going to be in play in the Absolute Universe here already. The light and the dark. The concept of needing to have control, willpower. That's always been a part of the Green Lantern mythos from the beginning. Now when it comes to Alan, he's just kind of chosen. He feels a bit destined. There's that kind of element to it, this mythic quality. There's less of a judgment taking place. That happens more in Hal's origin and beyond. Because when the Silver Age arrives in the mid-1950s, certain characters are revamped, and the Green Lantern is one of them. And there's a huge sci-fi element incorporated into that world. The magic element of the ring is pushed all the way out. This in the origin that many are more familiar with from Showcase number 22 in 1959. The alien Abensur crashes on Earth, and he's dying, and so he sends his ring out to find a worthy bearer, specifically one without fear. That's the qualification, which is something that is said multiple times in the Absolute Green Lantern. One must be without fear. The ring finds and brings back Hal Jordan, and then it'll be retconned later on that there were other people who could have been picked and those kind of things. However, that meant that there were these 2 Green Lanterns with these kind of different feeling origins, and years later the comics would seek to reconcile them. Just why were things different? Why was one magical? Why did they have different weaknesses? Alan's was wood and then Hal's was yellow. How exactly did Alan fit into the scope of the Guardians and all those things that evolved over in the main universe, what became the main universe, the Silver Age Earth, and then later Crisis Earth? The point is that Hal's world was the one that came to the forefront. And so it was that the Starheart entered the picture, with the idea being that the Starheart was the Guardians' attempt, in the first version, because now we've had a couple, to remove magic from the universe. So they bound the mystical energies into an orb, and then that orb gained sentience and became the Starheart. And then it became lonely and also felt that you could not just cut off magic from the universe, and so sent a part of itself off as the green flame. And that's what makes its way over to Earth. In the original canon, it crossed universes, and that's how it got to Alan. Later, things have of course changed. However, that idea of all the mystical energy being compressed into one, that has remained. Although they've also added to it with things like there being more than one flame, like the Crimson Flame. Sounds better than the Red Flame. Now, Absolute Green Lantern is bringing together elements from all of these things. The more obvious is the Hal stuff with the arrival of Abensur. Abensur still being the person to bring this kind of judgment. In this case, he seems to be the one judging. Or at the very least, there's a more direct judgment or a ringless judgment. This casts him almost in a Dark Star-like position. We'll talk more about Dark Stars in a second. But the element of judgment is the same as the original version. There's just a twist on it. Whereas the ring was seeking out and weighing people's worth, it was presented in a more uplifting way. It was less ominous and less biblical. Ewing has talked openly about bringing that kind of imagery into this work. Now, the Absolute Universe has a darkened tone, which works because this universe is meant to have been born of dark side energy, so it should in theory be darker. I have understanding. Judgment will now commence. I am the Abensur. Have understanding that I come to you from the Green Lantern. I exist at the green level of light. Be without fear. There's a whole symbology to green lights in general, and also in the Green Lantern lore. It started off with the whole train element for Alan, with that being a good signal, a go forward signal. But years later, we also have the electromagnetic spectrum, the emotional spectrum, emotional electromagnetic, it's all together. Potentially, we'll see the emotional spectrum come into play in a way, and the whole being without fear element, those are elements that have stayed true to Green Lantern lore. They become an intrinsic part of it. However, when the characters think of Abensur's word, or when that seems to be what they're thinking about, that imagery is much more akin to the Golden Age, or it harkens back to it, at least the way the language around it. It's much more reminiscent of the way the Starheart spoke. You exist at the green level of light. You must have knowledge of yourself. to command the flame. You must be without fear, entirely without fear. This series has been playing a lot with name-dropping little things here and there, and also things in the background, threads that may lead you down the right path or down a different one, or they may just be references for you to think about. However, there are things like how Hal's referred to his hand as both the Black Hand, which is a reference to a classic Green Lantern villain, the Black Hand, but he's also talked about how he feels thusly. The Black Hand, don't get too close, Joe. If it thinks I'm in danger or if I feel threatened, I can't hold it back. This thing, I can feel it in my head, Joe, like a dark star. The dark stars are a fascinating concept. Originally envisioned as a more extreme version of the Green Lantern Corps created by the isolationist controllers, they were warped post-Zero Hour and even more so later on, with versions like the Alpha Lanterns or Grant Morrison's Black Stars, of which Hal Jordan was an important and leading member. That one really played with the whole mythology of light versus dark, which is also being played with here, positioning Hal and Joe against each other as wielders of these kind of opposite forces, leading some to feel that Hal, rather than being a Green Lantern, is more akin to being a Dark Star. They boasted these kind of wrist guns, the Star Band. Totally not a bracelet. So we'll see which direction they pull Hal in this series. Hopefully not Parallax. I'll take Black Star over Parallax, but that's just my opinion. You may disagree. Each person seems to be having a different reaction based on what type of person they are, which is a fun element and calls a bit back towards that emotional spectrum type of thing. But this series is doing even more to bridge the kind of mystic and the science elements of Green Lantern lore, which is my word of the video. And that's in how it's playing with the Green Lantern's weaknesses. So far we've seen one, there may be more. In issue 1, when the barrier comes up, a hooligan slams into it on his motorcycle and just explodes, gets crushed. But his ring makes it through the barrier, something that Jon Stewart notices and picks it up. He doesn't get to do anything about it until issue 3. There is his issue to get to explore and do more things. And he finds that the barrier seems to be weak to gold. I say seems to be because they're also flirting a bit with potentially channeling. There's one panel where Hal asks Joe how she's controlling the power and she looks down at the ring on her hand. And Jon went to see her asking about the rings. We'll see, issue 3, time of recording. However, regardless of what's going on, this reference is very fun because the gold we're seeing, it's yellow. Now, both Alan and Hal's rings had weaknesses. They had to. Without them, they were essentially gods. The Silver Age introduced the yellow weakness, positioning it as a necessary impurity. This was later eliminated and confined to the realm of ideas that more contemporary readers found silly. However, it was also later explained as it being Parallax, the fear entity inhabiting the Great Power Battery, trying to come up with a more plausible explanation for it. Also there as part of the retcon to absolve Hal of part of his guilt for all those Green Lanterns he murdered when he joined the Next Snap Club after he went insane. This story envisions this weakness as a quasi-magical element by bringing up alchemy. This thing, this alien force field that totaled a speeding motorcycle right in front of us, it doesn't work on plastic? Cheap plastic. We need to stop applying the rules we know to the unknown. Ever hear the Philosopher's Stone? What? The central symbol of alchemy, the substance that turns base metal into gold. It can also heal wounds, prolong life, create a homunculus, light an ever-burning lamp. So you see, multiple things being played with. And again, the lamp, it's a symbol. It stands for enlightenment. What is base becomes gold through knowledge. So here they're playing with the idea that to be able to control, one must be able to understand. So there are several layers going on here, which makes it very fun. It's more than just one thing. It's a synthesis of a lot of ideas coming together that play with different threads from the Green Lantern universe and kind of compile them into something new. You've got those mystic leaning elements, the sci-fi elements, and it's fairly seamless because over time in the main universe, the elements of Alan's origin had to be folded into a line with Hal's, as he was the dominant Lantern, and the expanding lore out from the Silver Age started with him. But this, because it's a new universe, can cobble together something a bit different, and can come up with a kind of fusion that harkens back to...
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
Is it wrong to use a Marvel clip in a DC video? If that's wrong, I don't want to be right. The other cute element is that it's twisted just enough that it doesn't come across obviously as, oh, yellow. It's skirting lines around emotions and control and a whole bunch of things in a fun way. It's a real treat for those up on a bunch of different parts of the Green Lantern mythos because it's playing with so much. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's still presenting a compelling mystery and a different vibe. This does feel significantly different from what's going on in the main Green Lantern book, which, time of recording, is very awesome. Plus, we get to see Hal painting some bullets yellow. We edge ever closer to a fully yellow painted person once more. All-Star Batman and Robin reference, never forget. Judgment is in progress. This image, it's so close to the hand at the center of the universe that Cronus sees when he seeks the knowledge that causes the Guardians to exile him to travel across universes. The hand at the center of creation. Now there are some other just little things of note that are here. The Blue Devil Funko Pop, or Funzo Pop. Todd Rice being in town working at Alan Scott's. Todd being one of Alan's children. Obsidian. I'll take any version of Obsidian I can get. This series is certainly building upon itself. And so far, it's creating an interesting take on Green Lantern. And it's starting to branch out. You've seen the word Black Stars on Absolute Mirror Mastery's board. Absolute Superman, that book had mentioned the Adepts of Oa and the Black Stars. Things are starting to come together. However, we're here, so we might as well talk about some elements that everybody may not enjoy, or some may have said that they don't enjoy. Because as always, different strokes for different folks. Some feel this series is too slowly paced. They cannot get into it. Others don't like how it's once more casting Hal in a kind of antagonistic position, or maybe a weaker position, how he's crying all the time and the like. Some feel that there's some strong messaging throughout. Some feel that there is an anti-gun sentiment. With how some of the language surrounding Hal and some of the characters who have used guns against Abin-Sur, the question of was that the right choice, viewing that as a condemnation rather than as a question that the story is asking. Your mileage may vary, and as always with these discussions, some simply do not care. So far, because of the pacing, the book is doing a decent job of showing why Hal would react the way he has based on his more jump into action personality, and the fact that Abin-Sur has outright killed some people, and it looks like he's killed some of Hal's friends, even though if one looks closely, you can see the serene look on Jon's face as he vanishes in issue 3. Another element is the Joe factor. Joe was presented in the lead up and the marketing as the lead, the protagonist. Although, through some interviews, which not everyone will have gotten to, Ewing did describe her more as a POV character, at least at the start. We read some of those quotes in the last video about issue 1, and he also talked about how before they switched to her, there were some concerns about protagonist passivity. And if one was expecting her to be a very active protagonist, one can see why. Joe is not a very active character up to this point in issue 3, and not even that much of a POV character because it's much more of a third-person perspective. It's not exactly through her experience or eyes. Now that may change because this is a slow burn, and undoubtedly once it takes the time to move her to the foreground, then she'll become a bit more fully formed because at the moment she's a bit blank. However, the same could have been said for Jon, but he really shone in issue 3 when he got to do stuff. However, for some, this may rankle as they may have been expecting more Joe or more Joe off the bat, and a bit less Hal, even if he is suffering. He's crying black now. Never a good sign. It's nice to see that this book is just embracing so much of Green Lantern history, of which there is a lot. It's trying to come up with a synthesis, and it's fairly interesting what it's coming up with, at least to me. If you don't think so, let me know. What's coming together does have a bit of an otherworldly feel to it, which works well for the whole Close Encounters, Childhood's End thing this work is going on. I'm interested to see where it's going. It's fun to ponder or consider theories, which is always a nice place to be with a series. If you're enjoying it, of course. So I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Absolute Green Lantern and how it's playing with everything? Or if you're someone new to it, how are you liking it or not liking it? What are some cool details that brought in you notice that maybe we didn't discuss? Any theories? Let's chat Green Lantern. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it. Please do all the YouTube things. There'll be more videos coming soon. I'll see you there. Bye-bye.